So our next panel is on secure autonomy when blockchain governance meets AI agents. So we're standing at the edge of a new paradigm, where the world's most innovative governance models meets the world's fastest growing intelligence. And this panel on secure autonomy when blockchain governance meets AI agents tackles the pivotal question of the decade. How do we build a safe, secure, and truly autonomous digital economy? Decentralized autonomous organizations, or DAOs, were designed to replace human intermediaries with trusted code, but with the rise of AI agents, we are moving beyond simple programmed logic to machines that can actually learn, adapt, and make high-stakes, real-time decisions on-chain. So the potential is revolutionary. AI agents can optimize DeFi treasuries, manage liquidity, and automate complex smart contract execution 24/7. But this new autonomy introduces profound risks. And critically, how do we establish accountability in a system where decisions are made by an intelligent entity without human intervention? What if an AI could hack these DeFi systems? That question and many more we're going to answer, or try to answer, with our next panel. Please welcome Bernard Thalhammer. He's of Seed Social. He's our moderator for our next panel.
Hi, hello and welcome. My name is Bernhard Thalhammer. I'm the founder and CEO of Seed Social, and I have the honor to moderate this next panel, and would love to introduce our panelists. First of all, Krista Gambrell. She's a marketing advisor for Web3 and AI projects. Yes. Then we have Erwin Voloda. He's from the European Blockchain Association. Then Tim Van Gertner from the Lucerne University of Applied Sciences and Arts. And from Bank Frick, where he's the head of digital assets, Jonas Gantenbein. Great, so welcome dear panelists to our discussion about the secure autonomy when blockchain governance meets AI agents. And to kick off our discussion here, when we talk about the secure autonomy, what does that mean in your respective fields? Marketing, regulation, finance, and research. How close are we really to letting AI agents act independently in critical systems? Maybe, Krista, you want to kick this off?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for being a host today. Thank you for everyone coming today. I think from a marketing perspective, we're already seeing generative co-pilots operate in the industry, whether that's moderation in communities, whether that's support through customer support systems. And what we need to do is consider the next evolution of what agentic the agentic internet is, and essentially that means producing agents that can allow for, I'd say like ad spend in promotions or campaigns, and allocating funding, but that has to be done responsibly. And so when we start to consider, what that governance is, we have to consider how the frameworks in which we apply to these agents so that they can operate based on the authentic brand principles, as well as within the ethics of our governments and economy. So that's what we think about from a marketing perspective.
Okay, great. And I think programmatic buying of media has been maybe a little bit of a predecessor of the whole AI system.
Right. I think there's the two considerations. You start to consider the allocation as putting that through the generative AI and understanding how do we apply funds and using that as a way to inform the AI to then give it permission to eventually make that spend.
Okay.
So I think there's like, that's sort of the guardrail that we think through when we're thinking from a marketing perspective.
Okay.
So it's not just like, hey, like, let's give you access to our, our bank account and you can spend this much money. It's a progressive relationship, I think, especially from a digital marketing perspective, where you build that relationship, there's a human-computer interface, and then eventually, once you get to the autonomous space, the risk is a little bit more predictable.
Okay, thank you. So Erwin, from the regulatory point of view, is AI in a situation where it writes his or her or it regulation itself? How far are we?
Well, I think to focus also on the how, but from that perspective, a big challenge, obviously, for regulators in the conversations that we have with them is that this topic is still very much at the margins of where they understand developments. And if you look at, for example, spaces where, let's say, regulation hasn't really caught on or is still not as mature, like in DeFi, you already have agents that are doing a lot of things like managing native staking protocols and things like that. So that autonomous connectivity that you discussed, when you marry that with any sort of financialization or composability at the protocol level, can exacerbate issues that could become systemic. Now, for example, with rehypothecation, we have this, but you can imagine if there were agents that were piggybacking on rehypothecation chains, and that kind of went back, it could really harm the end user if there was some sort of glitch or some sort of issue with the code base. And I think for regulators, whenever they're looking at how we're going to establish regulations, how is this going to affect the end user, whether the end user is an institution, whether the end user is a retail customer, and especially with regards to payments, there's already a lot of work coming from again at the protocol level, and also how this works with the actual settlement. And for regulators that are looking at this stuff, I can tell, at least in my conversations, it's not exactly that clear to them where that is supposed to go, or for example, even how the AI Act might work in tandem, especially because the AI liability directive is effectively dead at this point. So even if, in the event of something happening, there's this lack of a recourse mechanism, and from a consumer protection perspective, obviously that at some point that will probably become an issue.
Okay, well, thank you for your perspective. And Tim, what is your take on that?
Yeah, I think from a research perspective, we want to push boundaries. So we first want to try out what's possible, what can we do? Can we directly connect agents with blockchain? Can we just initiate or execute transactions in smart contracts and the thing? And then at the same time also look into security. How can we make this secure? What possibilities are there?
Okay, thank you. Then Jonas, what about the finance perspective? Are you already letting AI agents run everything, or what's the situation in the bank?
I wish. No, it's we coming from the bank's perspective where I work. Obviously, there is a vision that we have multi-agentic systems in place because it makes sense, right? It's a banking sector is centuries old, and we have been in a red ocean market for decades now, and that means you have to invent on the cost side of the balance sheet and not on the income side, rather. And multi-agentic systems are the holy grail, so to speak, as of now, on cutting costs, right? Where you have tasks or through the whole bank, essentially, tasks that can be done with multi-agentic systems. But now, as of now, I think we are only laying the groundwork, so to speak. There are a lot of challenges that awaits us in getting there at the end. And it starts with data, simple. It continues with connectivity and APIs within systems. It's one thing when we talk about having agentic systems work on-chain, where everything is connected and seamlessly interoperable. That's not the case with a financial institution at all. So those types of challenges we are trying to face and lay sort of the groundwork.
Okay. Well, very interesting insight. Thank you. So when we talk about the governance and trusts, we kind of then expect AI agents to act autonomously, right? Because that's what they're here for. But still, on the other hand, they need accountability. So my question is, can blockchain really serve as the trust and audit layer for these agentic systems, or do we risk overestimating what DLT in the end can really do? You want to go first?
Yeah, sure. I think we are probably underestimating the power of DLT within these ecosystems and overestimating the human wrapper, which is guiding that. I think that's where that's a relationship that we have to consider, right? So we can, from a marketing lens, we can consider how we allocate responsibility for decisions made along the way, and that immutable, technology with DLT, it gives us that ability to go back and see those records, right? When we can start to consider how we hold people accountable or the decision maker along that process accountable, then we can start to look at DLT. But it's about integrating those mechanisms for check-ins for each of those stakeholders along the way. So I do think that, we're probably underestimating the power of the DLT, and then considering, how do we develop that from an operational perspective in organizations so that we can integrate accountability using that technology.
Okay, so based on the Gartner hype cycle, we would have kind of a peak of under expectation then towards what DLT can do, if we translate it to that.
Yeah.
Okay, okay, great. Erwin, what do you think about that?
I mean, look, from my perspective, it comes down to the fact that blockchains are append-only systems, okay? So the environment within which a smart contract, and Tim will probably know more about this, but the environment within which a smart contract operates is rigid. No. And agents, that risk, whatever that risk may be, the downstream effects of it could be managed intrinsically within the confines of the smart contract, and for other things like, for example, in zero-knowledge machine learning, which is a growing field. And I think it's important to consider that because blockchain allows you, at least in theory, and we're seeing it more and more in pilots, composability and sort of this Lego-like architecture. And so you could build really innovative products, and you could build really, really innovative value chains with distributed ledgers, and then optimizing, to your point, adding the agents into that framework. You could also then push the margin of that cost reduction even further, but then potentially also create more innovative workflows, which, aside from saving time, may yield other ways of doing business. And I think this is really really fascinating in the mobility space, right, where they're doing a lot of experimentation with how DLTs coupled with agents can settle microtransactions for smart metering and for vehicles and toll roads and stuff like that. Some of this stuff was even piloted in MoveID and GaiaX, from my understanding. And so when you move on to things like payments, we see a lot of stuff in the space now where those smart contract environments are being used to integrate with stablecoins at the settlement leg, which is providing for obviously efficiency gains in those payment value chains. And so, sure, I definitely believe that there's an argument to be made there. Okay, great, thank you. Tim, what is your take on that?
Yes, as much as I love blockchain, I think blockchain is a distributed database and garbage in, garbage out forever. So I think blockchain itself doesn't bring trust or cannot bring trust. And also smart contracts are in this enclave or sandbox of the blockchain, and they cannot go out. So we heard about the blockchain, the Oracle problem in the panel before. I think there are possibilities to bring transparency, to bring immutability to topics, but that's always from a post-view perspective. But really auditing or taking control of agents, I have my doubts there.
Okay. Okay, well, I think we'll address that topic a little later on, but thank you for your take. Now, Jonas, please.
I'm with Tim on this one. I think blockchain in this particular use case is overrated in a sense of everything it does is verify integrity. It does not verify intent. So the agent or the agents can misbehave or can be misaligned, and misalignment is a huge problem, by the way. It can be misaligned, and it still can do that on a blockchain, but it's just open there to see. We can have traceability on that. Okay, that's fine, but it does not solve the actual problems. And one thing I would note is also that we are talking about DeFi space. We are talking about on-chain space here. we want to have multi-agentic systems not only on-chain, but off-chain as well, in the real world as well. And I haven't seen any bank that would be sort of accepting, or that would be able or capable into incorporating blockchain databases as a foundational layer into their systems, into their architectures, in order to tackle the verification problem. So I think it's much more a problem of, can we adapt in the real world? Can we use blockchain? And I don't think that's quite so trivial.
Okay, great. Then maybe let me continue with you to go the other direction, otherwise we get dizzy. If we talk about risk and resilience, and I think also very relevant, of course, for the banking and finance industry, if we let the AI agents initiate transactions or manage assets, what's the biggest failure scenario that you can think of? And can then DLT or the blockchain realistically contain this? What do you think about this?
Every time in finance there is, if we talk about the risk of losing funds for our customers, that's paramount, the risk to mitigate, right? Yeah. I don't think, as I mentioned, I don't see blockchain being able to prevent that sort of risk. How we handle it, or so to speak, financial institutions as of now handle it not on the blockchain level. They handle it through architecture that allow them to manage the keys. That's where the magic happens, and the governance layers are, and transactions are being processed and being sort of reviewed. And I don't think blockchain can sort of help in that regard. I haven't seen any solutions. Let's put it like that.
Okay. All right. Then, Tim, what's the biggest risk scenario that you can think of, or the biggest failure scenario in these terms?
Well, yeah, losing funds typically, or assets. I think that's the major issue. And I think when we look in what's now going on on a technical level, like X402 protocol or MCP, so that agents or large language model can initiate transactions on the blockchain. And yeah, we know they can make errors, they can be misaligned, they can hallucinate, and then they can lose the funds. You can try to build guardrails around, so say, okay, I have only secured addresses or an address book, and they only can interact with them. But if you just give them your money and say, go, play around, then could be from winning 200x until losing everything. Yeah. But that's could also happen to us when we are on the stock market. So.
Okay. And then from the regulatory point of view, what's the situation when the AI transfers all the funds to whatever, the Cayman Islands, and then the founder of the project says, well, it wasn't me, it was the AI. What's the regulatory framework going to do about this?
I think it was mentioned a little bit earlier in the panel, but this, where the human is in the loop. I think with a lot of these agents, the issue ultimately comes down to, like, what is the attestation framework that's being used to link the agent to whoever spun up the agent? Or if the agent spun up an agent, what is the first principle of that? Like, who's the ultimate entity that pushed the button that said, go agent, go? And I think that this is something that regulators will ultimately look at, because the law is, you have Alice and you have Bob. And Bob has done something to Alice. And a regulator will draw as straight a line as they can from Bob to Alice. There could be a banana peel or an oil slick in the way, and they will just go around the banana peel and the oil slick, because they need to be able to connect those two parties. That's how the law works. So I think that the issue potentially could be in the future where we're talking about, like, the delegated liabilities. But to be fair, there's concepts out there. Like, for example, if you look at verifiable legal entity identifiers, if you use a VLEI to link the attestation of, for example, a fund manager and then the agents under them in some sort of credentialing scheme, you create a root chain of trust. right? And I think from a regulatory perspective, this is important because ultimately it's going to be the fiduciary who's going to be responsible if something goes under, and they can't cry foul and say, oh, well, sorry, this agent went haywire. Well, no, sir, you spun it up. So I think there's going to be a lot more of this need for verifiability and the ability to link these attestation frameworks, on-chain identities, different types of credential standards. For example, VLEI uses carry, but there's JOTS, there's all sorts. And this is the next frontier. And I think that regulators are going to pay a lot more attention to what's happening in that space, where that root chain of trust is being kind of designed, and then what the ultimate kind of knock-on effects are in the event of sort of systemic scenarios, or in the event of some forced liquidations, or whatever happens. Like what happened recently when we had 19 billion liquidated because people were heavily screwed on cross margin. That could be even worse if it was all agents just doing that, right? But forget the markets for a second. If your agents are managing your internal company databases, or they're writing code or stuff like that, and then they hallucinate, and suddenly like you have no backend anymore.
Okay. So again, the humans are the problem. Is that what you're saying?
There's a level of reputation risk. There's cyber resilience risk. There's operational risk.
Okay.
You pick your poison.
Okay. All right. So maybe what's your take on this, on the kind of the biggest risk or biggest failure scenario?
I think from a marketing perspective, we think a lot through like the integrity of a brand, and I think the narrative could be something that could be easily damaged if the AI agent was focused solely on metrics. And so when you consider it's like these hallucinations, like early in, when like Google released their AI, or even like the Microsoft released their like X agent, right? Like, or then Twitter, right? It sort of created a really bad narrative. It was, so I think from a marketing perspective, that's one huge risk, because it can do damage beyond repair. And I think, that's what we're always considering from the digital marketing perspective.
Okay, great, thank you. So maybe looking at the time a little bit, we have still time for a quick closing round. So maybe let's talk about the outlook, right? So if everything works, policy, tech, and adoption, what would a trusted agentic economy look like in 5 years? And maybe just one word or two words, what steps can we take today to make this happen? Maybe Jonas, you want to kick this off?
An agentic, multi-agentic system that allows us the bank to perform tasks that are not high critical, but even more efficient. And to put it short, what has to be done, go to www.bankfrick.li, there's a career page, there are a couple of AI career paths laid in front of you. So
great, very concrete, thank you. Great. Tim.
Yeah, I think if we reach the time where everybody of us has this AI assistant, and we just, in the night, just let them off and say, well, okay, double my money until tomorrow, I think then our banking sector and society will have other issues, because if everybody wants to do this, then somebody has to lose.
Okay, thank you. Erwin, please keep it short.
I think it comes down to what the lowest common denominator is, where the efficiencies can be had most. So in 5 years, I think there's going to be a lot more developments on those layers, but I also expect to see much more on the trust layer as well. And I think that linking that trust is, at least from regulatory perspective, where policymakers will be most interested.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah,
Christoph.
I'd say reduced risk equals increased authenticity.
Okay. Great. Well, that's very short and very nice closing words. So thank you, dear panelists and the audience for your attention. And enjoy the rest of the conference, and see you around at the coffee. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey,